Welcome, everyone, to Coffee and an Interview. I'm Jacqueline Pena, and I'm excited about this conversation today with Kristina Katayama. She works in strategic whole systems change, but we started by getting to know each other around workplace culture and who we are in the workplace and how we're part of a greater system. And I just thought, what a great conversation for all of you today, because we're all part of some kind of a workplace. And so, Kristina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
Oh my God. And I know our readers, our listeners, like you say, readers, our listeners cannot see your background, but it's beautiful. It's like we're outdoors, and I wish we were outdoors right now. It's a beautiful background that brings peace into the workplace setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do so that we can frame this conversation today for our listeners.
So, like you said, my name is Kristina Katayama. I'm the founder and lead consultant for Be Possible. We work with organizations on many levels through whole systems change, from leadership development, organizational development, and centered around culture and creating workplaces and work cultures that thrive, right? Cultures that, instead of fracturing under pressure, grow stronger through honest engagement. And instead of reactivity, developing the fortitude and the muscle for relational courage, and the magic that comes from that, and the life force that moves through the people of the organization and the work that they do and the communities they serve.
Wow. I love the words like cultures that thrive and the magic that comes from those cultures with honest engagement. And for for all of us, we're all part of a workplace in some way. We're all part of these systems and these cultures. So we've all experienced something, there's a role we all play, and there's a piece that we contribute to culture. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you look at culture and cultures that thrive, how do you define or describe workplace culture?
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about cultures that thrive and how do we describe that, we actually do listening sessions with the people who work there. This could be interviews or focus groups, and we're asking that question. Tell us about a moment that went really well. Tell us about a moment in which you felt the, vitality, that you were thriving. And just a moment, right? It doesn't have to be the whole thing. It doesn't have to be all the time. As a matter of fact, mostly what we learn in the beginning are those exceptional moments, right? And the work that we are doing is learning from those exceptional moments. What were the conditions that made that possible? What can we do to amplify those conditions so that that exceptional moment becomes the norm?
Wow. Listening sessions and those exceptional moments, try to understand them to make those become the norm in a workplace, to create a culture that thrives, a workplace culture that thrives. We've all been in different workplace cultures, whether we were interns, full time employees, consultants. We also jump into these spaces. And when we go into these spaces, we don't always think about the workplace culture, right? We're first thinking about the job. Um, I'm starting to think, if I'm the person coming into the organization, what does that mean to me? I mean, am I coming into the culture and assimilating? Can I contribute to the culture? Um, what if I'm rambling here with so many ideas. Like, what happens if I realize it's a little toxic or the energy's off? What is my role in this workplace culture as part of the team? Let's start there. What is the role of that individual? Because I have like 20,000 questions around workplace culture at the individual level before we even think about the full system or both.
Right, right. And, I want to add a little something to your earlier question about what is culture and how can we describe it, right? And one of the images that came to mind is just think about how you feel
Mm.
when you walk into a room. How do you feel when you see a certain person, right? And so sometimes when I see someone, I might just relax, right? Take a deep breath. It's like, oh, feel some sense of calming or relief. Or another person, I might just get really excited. It's like, oh, I am so glad to see you, right? Another person, I might just get really tense and guarded, right? And again, it can be maybe an individual stimulates that feeling, or a room stimulates that feeling, a group stimulates that feeling, whatever it is, right? That is an indicator of the culture, right?
Mm.
Because there's I'm going to use the word being, right? There's what we do, and then there's how we do it, and what are the expectations, the unspoken rules, the things that you learn by tripping up over them or witnessing them, right? Yeah. So you said a lot in your last question. Would you mind saying the last part again?
I know. I had like 50 questions rolled into one. And I'll share the last question, but thank you for reminding us that when we go into a room, that culture, we have to think about how we feel, that intuition, and trust that, because we have those gauges in us already in terms of that when we see a person or we enter a room or anything like that. And I think I'm kind of curious because we're all part of the culture, and we're all part of the system. And so I started thinking about it at the individual level. Maybe I'm thinking about it backwards. Maybe I should think about the system first. But the question was really about how do we as individuals contribute to
Mm,
that culture, and what
mm,
can we do as individuals to shift that culture if we need to shift it a little bit?
right. Got it. So one thing that is really important to remember, and I remind myself over and over and over, right, is that we are both creation and creator, right?
Mm.
So when we walk into a system, we are impacted by it, we are affected by it,
Mm-hmm.
and I impact it and affect it when I step in. Just like, the example that we gave earlier, when somebody comes into a room, how does my body respond, right? Um, and so just as far as how, well, let me say a few things, and I'll ask a question first. I am thinking that if I can share a few things about what it is that we learned about how change actually works in an organization, and how we do things differently because of what we learned. And I think those things will then help answer the question, like as an
Oh.
individual, right?
Oh, yes. Let's look at the system and come down. I love this. Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that shows up in training, right? If you're doing organizational development training and things like that, is and leadership development, is getting the leadership team aligned, right? And very often when I've been hired, it's generally one person on the executive team, and there's often an assumption. It's like the leadership team needs to hold the line, whatever that is. And what we have found when we talk about real change, not performative change, not on the surface, but real, reliable, sustainable change, is I have to choose it. I am a sovereign being. It does not matter what my title is. It doesn't matter if I have the title of leader and that expectation is there, or if I don't have a leadership title, I am still a sovereign being that has the power to affect my space, my relationships through my everyday interactions. And so when we were trying to get the leadership team aligned, we
Mhm.
were that's actually, I'm going to use this word, it's oppressive, because we forget there's a human being. And does this human being choose it? Or are they just going along because they're obligated? Do they feel resentful, disagree, whatever, but they're accommodating or of, let's say, not showing up? Like they maybe not be actively resisting, but they're also not showing up because it's like, yeah, whatever. I really don't care about this. I have more important things to deal with, or whatever it is, right? And so what we found is the very first and most important thing, if we are talking about um, elevating agency in any person to affect change, they have to choose it, period. And
Mm.
then, so it only takes one leader in a leadership team to be the internal champion and choose it. And the rest of the leadership team does not have to acquiesce or pretend or whatever. They choose it or they don't as a sovereign being. And then um, calling, reaching out across the organization to invite any individual, wherever they may be in the organization, that does feel called to and or aligned with this vision that this leader has around culture and wanting to make the workplace thrive and feel vital, right? And you bring those people together. And the beautiful thing about that is that when people choose from wherever they are, and then the work that we do, and so now we'll move into the individual, is
Mm-hmm.
develop that individual agency, right? They become seeds all over the whole organization through the work that we do, the practices that we do. And that change is happening, right? It is changing as the individuals who choose to be a part of it change.
Powerful. And and going back to how you said you start with, you get information through the listening sessions, ties to this in the sense that we're humans, there's human agency, we make a choice. And so if you can find the leader or leaders within the organization who see this and want to make that change, you don't need all of them, just need one or two. And then and other individuals that will join. And then there's this work that happens for systems change, for that workplace culture transformation. But these systems change, then that starts spreading. And I love this, this image of the seeds, right? All these seeds are now spread through all the departments, through all the organization, through the in-person and the virtual, and through the different circles. And these seeds are going out there and they're sprouting more of that change.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So then, okay, so if we're in a system, we're going to use one where maybe we could think of toxic workplace cultures in different scales, or there are many cultures that workplace cultures where they're trying to work towards something, but the systems aren't there to get there, and people aren't working together towards the same shared goals and things like that. To shift that requires this kind of work. If I'm in the workplace and we'll play from both sides, the leadership and the individuals who are part of teams reporting to the leaders. If I'm in that leadership role, what should I be looking for? What should I be doing? What should I be changing if I want to turn around a toxic workplace culture and I'm a newer senior leader there? Where can I start? And you shared some of that already with some, with the work you do, the listening sessions and trying to bring people together. What can I do? I'm here. What do I do?
So let me give you an example. Um, so we had gathered together the people who wanted to be part of the change. And their area of focus. So the first thing is getting clear, where am I going to put my attention, right? Because if I'm not specific, right? If I'm super generic and just like, oh, it sucks here. This is a toxic workplace. I can't stand it. It's got to change. And it's like, okay, what?
What
Right?
are we changing?
Exactly. And so in this case, this group chose to create, what they wanted is they wanted, oh, and that's another really key thing is when we're interviewing, and this is kind of the beginning of building some muscle and it takes some practice, which is when we ask, what is it that you want to see change? Often the first things out of people's mouths is what does not work, what I don't like. I don't like this. I don't like, we're not going to do that. I can't, no more of this. That sucks. But it's like lots of complaining, lots of what not, what I don't like, all of that. And so the first thing is, what is it that you actually want? So these initial questions and listening sessions are really important to be able to identify, well, what is it that we want? Not what we don't want. What do we want? Where are we going? What are we creating? So this group gathered together because they wanted to create a new relationship with conflict. And what did that actually mean? Right? And so we invited the people who had ideas about that. What is this new relationship with conflict? And took examples of where conflict worked well. And what does that mean? How
Oh,
do I know that conflict's working well? Well, first of all, we can continue to work our way through a conversation, even when there are significant differences in our perspectives or in what it is that we think we need, right? And but we can stay in that conversation long enough to learn from each other uh, until we can find where we're connected, where there's a shared need, and or create what's needed to bridge gaps. And if we can't stay connected long enough to move from the disconnect to a space of learning, to a space of co-creating, nothing's going to change, right? So there was an example that someone brought that they were really frustrated, would say this was a toxic experience for them. And that is they had weekly meetings with their team and their manager and and basically had the experience of just being talked at. So
oh,
decisions would be made. The manager would say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what you're going to do, this is the goal, the expectation, da 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 da, right? And the people who were on the team were like having all kinds of thoughts and all kinds of feelings, but silent.
couldn't share.
And the manager would always say, I want to hear from you, right? I want to hear from you. And someone spoke up. This was an example. Someone spoke up and the manager made space for them to speak up. And when they were done, continued with the agenda. Didn't address what this person actually said, but just continued with the agenda. So, um, so this person who was part of this team was going to use that environment, that daily interaction that they had, to experiment with creating a new relationship with conflict. And so the experiment that they did, we call these micro experiments, or little tiny mini things that she could see herself doing. And the first thing that she recognized that she just needed to learn what was actually going on. There's what you saw on the surface, what you could witness with your eyes and your ears, what was being said or not, right? Um, And what she noticed at first was she paid attention to her body. She paid attention to the fact that she kept making fists. She paid attention to the fact that she was clenching her teeth. She paid attention to the fact that she was feeling that she noticed she had lots to say. And she was feeling resentful that she didn't have the space to say it. And she was feeling resentful when she watched her manager talk past what someone else had offered. When the manager said, "Hey, I want to hear what you have to say," right? And um, and so the experiment was, and so she continued to observe herself, and then she noticed she was the one keeping herself silent. And then she noticed that the resentment was on her. She was resenting herself for not speaking up for herself. And then she noticed she was also hesitating or afraid because of what she had seen.
Already
Somebody
take
else
place.
spoke up. So we created a little plan, right? And the plan was, okay, you have something to say. And what I'm hearing is that you want to know that you've been heard, because what you witnessed is that your coworker was not heard, that you could tell anyway. You didn't see from the manager's response that whatever your coworker offered was even heard or acknowledged. And so you have something to say and you have a need to be heard. So one thing you can do is allow yourself to take some space and speak up, especially when the manager asks, right?
In the meeting.
In the meeting. And when you're done speaking, ask, would you let me know what you heard?
Oh, that's a good technique.
And so then you can get your need met to know that you've been heard. So then they took this little tiny action in their next meeting, their next team meeting with their manager, and they spoke up and said what they needed to say. And what they noticed when they were talking is that their manager was just typing away. And she noticed like a moment of emotional charge, right? But she had a plan. And she said at that moment, would you be willing to tell me what you heard me say? And the manager was a little bit flustered, stopped typing, and said, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Would you say it again? And so then she repeated herself. And then then she said, so would you be willing to tell me what you heard me say? And so then he could confirm, so he, summarized back what she said, and they continued from there, right? So that one little tiny shift affected the interaction, affected the team, because now the whole team is learning, oh, I can speak up. I can also get my need met to be heard and actually get a response from the manager. Like this can be a dialogue, not just an agenda that's being thrown at me, since I'm the one that's going to be responsible for doing something with this. And if I can't get my questions answered or whatever, right? And so that's just an example of the work that we do, the practices and the power that happens with myself as a single individual doing the work to, first of all, become aware of what's going on for me, what it is that not stopping at, I'm resentful, I'm not, my manager doesn't listen, and all of this long list of complaints, to, oh, I need to speak up because it matters to me. And I need to know that I've been heard. And what can I do? What can I do to increase to create the conditions to get that need met? I can ask a simple question, right? So these are little micro experiments, tiny things that I can do that build my own muscle and shape the interactions that I'm a part of around me.
Powerful example because you're right. I think a lot of times when we look at workplace culture, however we want to label that culture, we start with the complaints. Oh, this and this and this and that. And we might not really take the time to reflect on where that's coming from. There's something broader that's happening. But then your example is about self-awareness, which is such a difficult thing to do, right? To reflect, become self-aware, and say, okay, what makes this uncomfortable for me? And what is one small thing I can try? A micro experiment. I love that term, micro experiment. That I can try to shift that a little bit. And something very small, a micro experiment, can really create a big shift. We might not see it right away, but if you look, other people see that I did the micro experiment. They see how well the micro experiment went. Other people might feel more comfortable speaking up, and it'll create more dialogue rather than just share, but we're just moving on. And that's a powerful example of the role we play and how we can look at ourselves and say, okay, what can I do differently? Because it's a circle of influence too, right? I can't control everything around me. What can I control? I can understand how I feel and control my actions to see if I can generate a slightly different response.
Right. And that's such an important thing that you say, because one of the things that she realized is how she was participating in the culture that was, right?
Mm.
And in the moment that she recognized that she was silencing herself,
Mm.
in that moment, she had a choice. Before that moment, she didn't have a choice. She was just victim to the circumstance, right? But the moment she noticed and she chose to do something different, and that micro it's something that was doable and in her daily interactions. And that's what we talk about when we talk about embedded change. So this isn't just about being in a class or being in a training. This is about actually embedding change in the organization. And it works. There's power when the people who are participating in it want to participate. They choose it because there's work, there's effort, there's energy, my life energy, my life force energy. And when we do it this way, when I choose it and I apply it in my everyday interactions, and in this case we had little coaching pods, right?
Mm.
Um, and so people would come together, and all of these people that would come together in these little coaching pods, they're from all different parts of the organization. They don't normally work together. And so they're practicing, they're learning with, from, and in front of each other. And, and, you know, if you will, designing their micro experiments to go out into their workplace and conduct their micro experiments, then come back to the coaching group to share what they've learned and learn from each other, right? And that then stimulates to design the next micro experiment and go back out into the workplace in your everyday interactions and try it out and then come back, right? And in the end, you have evidence about how change works and what I can do to affect that change.
Mm, I love that. And there's so many, you talked about coaching pods. I wrote that down. So there's so many natural groups already within organizations where you are collaborating. That could be a great place to have those conversations and to do the micro experiments. So you might have your employee resource groups, maybe, different organizations have different groups that come together in a structured manner or just in an informal, unstructured manner where you can work together and help each other with these micro experiments to start shifting the organization a little bit. And
Yeah, and
and
what I find is, when we talk about, going back to the example of seeds, right, that
yep.
are going out. So all of these seeds carry everything that they need to uh, be, planted and grow into, the full potential of whatever that seed is carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And they also need, if you will, I'll say support, right? Because seeds are the beginning, right? So having these coaching pods, having them be intentional, having a place to return to for nourishment, right? Is actually really important, because when they're going out into the organization, you know, is it fertile ground, right? Or is
Good
it
question.
depleted ground?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so if it's depleted ground, returning to that place that's fertile, in this case, the coaching pod, right? Where there's energy and reflection, like I'm not alone in this, even though I might be alone over there at that part of the organization. I'm not alone in this process of change. I have these other people that are also in this organization, in this culture, the way that it is today, right? Doing their experiments over there. And um and so that and I have, the support and guidance of a coach. So that is kind of where the fertilization, the water, the light and energy and nourishment goes, so that when I go out, maybe to other areas of the organization that are depleted, I keep coming back, if you will, to that well of nourishment, right?
Mm. And that actually helps a lot, because a lot of times we feel alone in trying to shift how things are going for us in the workplace, or how the workplace feels. That itself starts depleting your energy even further, and when you're alone. But when you have this nourishing group that you can come to re-nourish and be able to then try a different micro experiment, it just makes it so much more doable versus just constantly being depleted energy wise,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
passion wise, culture wise. Very interesting. So, before we jumped on the podcast, we were talking about also system wide culture, enterprise wide culture transformation. We started talking about that to get to the individual piece and what we contribute, and our circle influence in that area, and the seeds, how we become part of the seeds, and then go out. But what if we're trying to do system wide, enterprise wide cultural transformation for whatever reason, whatever's going on? Where do we start? How do we tackle this at the big system versus just this one leader and that group?
I'll say that is where it starts. So there needs to be an internal champion
I love that. Okay.
that is committed to this work.
Mm,
And so starting there, we go through uh, a multi-phase process. The first
mhm,
one that we talked about was, you know, essentially the leader defines what is it that we're focusing on, right? If we're
mhm,
focusing on creating a culture of vitality and well-being to thrive as
mm,
we uh, work together. Um, and then the next thing is the discovery process. So that is the listening sessions, and whether that's interviews, focus groups, things like that, to find these stories around the organization about those exceptional moments that worked well, and what were the conditions that made that possible, and and in that discovery process. And then the next thing is like dreaming and visioning. What would this organization be when those exceptions were the norm? What would be possible? And getting really descriptive with words and images about that future based on that reliable experience that we had in the past, and amplifying it. And so then getting clear about where we're going,
mhm.
right? So, because if you want to go anywhere, right, what are you moving towards? So that's the work of focusing on what is it that we want, right? So that's the next phase. Then the phase after that is, now how are we going to get there? And that's
Mm-hmm.
where we do these little experiments in our everyday interactions. Again, they're supported, but we're doing these experiments in our everyday interactions and learning from them. And after running many little micro experiments and the change is underway in these little tiny pockets around the organization, now those individuals in the organization have evidence from their experiments and can make recommendations to the organization about what do I recommend in order for us to continue and or to grow and scale these little tiny experiments that we tried in these different parts of the organization. So now that next phase is about taking the recommendations from the experiments to scale what we've learned. And these recommendations are coming from the people in the organization, right? And it's coming from the work that they've done to already experiment where they are in their team, in their department, or whatever. That worked well, right? And they did repeated experiments. And now they're coming forward with evidence-based recommendations and about how to scale that. And that then, now we're talking about the implementation to grow that across the organization. So those are the 5 phases.
Oh, I love that because it's very clear, it's concrete, you have your champion, which we talked about at the beginning as well. Your one leader who can be your champion. And then you have evidence-based practices, you're experimenting, you're seeing what works, what doesn't work. But before you get there, you're thinking about where do we want to go? What is it that we want to focus on? And then, okay, what will we look like once we focus on that? Okay, now let's try to figure this out. What's going to work to get us there? Micro experiments. Okay, what's working in these micro experiments? What's not? Things that are working. Can we scale it? Let's try it. And so everything is very much taking that more scientific. Let's be clear about where we're trying to go. Let's figure out what are the best methods. Okay, now let's implement those best methods. Now let's scale those best methods. It's a very strong evidence-based approach to have that system-wide change. So for those of us who like concrete processes, right? It's not, we always joke, it's not just about the mushy stuff or how we feel. It's literally concrete. There's something there. There's something we want to work for. There's a way to get there. Let's see if this works. Let's see if this works. And then what's working best? Let's scale it. Here's some concrete strategies that can be used. And I value concrete. I like concrete strategies. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I can say we have a couple of clients that allowed us to do little video documentation through that process. And so if that's something that your listeners would like to see, I can share that link with you. And they can see kind of the progression over time, because there are multiple videos of this change process in an organization.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. For our listeners, the links are in the description of the podcast episode. So you can click on the link or copy and paste it into your favorite browser to get to these resources. So thank you. That'll be fascinating. I feel like I'm in a science experiment. I don't know if any of you studied, remember those science experiments in school, or for me with my doctorate, I definitely completed quite a few data collection experiments, but it's great to see the evidence and see it in this way, to connect it to the ideas we're talking about. I'm loving this approach too, because I hear a lot of things that help me become more engaged in the workplace, that help me develop a stronger sense of belonging in the workplace, that give me a higher level of satisfaction with being part of the workplace, which means I'm going to be bringing my best game to the workplace and my productivity is going to be better. I'm going to feel better about myself because of the work I'm doing. So I'm looking at, we're talking about systems level change and we keep going back and forth between the individual and the system. But in doing that work, it really has a great impact on the individual, a positive impact, and what they contribute to the organization. So thank you for allowing us to play between the two sides, the individual versus the whole system in the conversation.
Yeah, and speaking of tools,
Mm-hmm.
one other resource that I can offer is we have a collection of 4 quizzes, and this is all around tension and the patterns that you can see in, whether it's in yourself, in leadership, in teams, or in the organization. So, for example, what's really driving tension on your team? Leadership patterns when tension rises. How conflict capable is your team? Or the nervous system of your organization. That was something actually that you and I were talking about quite a bit before we started recording,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really important to say here is nervous system regulation. Because what we now know and understand, both from our lived experience as well as from science, is that when we're dysregulated, we no longer have access to our best self, to our highest capabilities. We are no longer connected to the executive functioning of our brain, which is what allows us to be attuned and connected in relationship, allows us to be creative, to do problem solving, and to learn, right? When we are in this environment that is constantly changing and so many unknowns, our ability and capacity to learn is crucial. And in order to have access to that capacity ourselves, being emotionally regulated is what allows us to do that. So that particular quiz is actually looking at the nervous system health of an organization.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was a great conversation on self-regulation and those components. So thank you for access to the tools and for that conversation as well. Because we all make part of the whole organization. And humans, we are emotional. We have emotions. We're talking about how this is an emotional labor, this work of the reflection and figuring out our role in the organization and what's going on. Very
Yeah,
difficult stuff.
yeah. And our emotions are actually energy,
Yes.
right? It's
Yes.
energy and it's intelligence. And so understanding our emotions, working with emotions in ourselves and with others actually gives us the information or intelligence
Mm.
and the energy that we need to deal with whatever it is that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. Energy. Thank you for sharing that.
mhm,
That is true.
mhm.
Very true. Wow. As we come to the end of our session here today, and I use the word session, I almost feel like I'm in therapy. Sorry about that. Our interview slash session. As we come towards the end of our session today, is there anything else you would like to share or anything I didn't get to ask you about that you feel might be relevant as we wrap up the interview?
Thank you for that question. I recently asked that question of somebody else. Uh,
Really?
and one of the things that he said that just really caught my attention, he said, "Okay, so ask me what's meaningful."
Oh, wow.
And and what I can say is why I do this work, right? Is because I really care about our collective well-being. And what I have learned uh, through my process is I kept putting myself out, right, to contribute to our collective well being. And I, in the beginning, forgot that I was part of that. And so expanding my own muscle to be attentive to or to tend to and care for my well being so that I even understand what makes up well being. And that's then what allows me to offer it and give it from my fullness and from my well being because I understand what it is in the system of my own self.
What that means.
Mhm. Yeah.
Very powerful. I think we have some reflecting to do ourselves because of this interview. And some things we need to define for ourselves, and that's a great place to start as well. And as we approach this work at within our organizations. So with that, Christina, I just want to thank you so much for the interview and for the conversation. It's not an easy conversation to talk about systems change, workplace culture, and individuals, because it does bring in the science and the emotional, right? We're humans and we're a part of that formula. So I appreciate you being here today. And I appreciate all of our listeners for listening to the episode and picking up on little tidbits. I know I'm leaving here really with a couple of tools to bring into the work I do with different organizations and my own organizations. I'm sure there's something here that you got from it. And remember that the resources are in the description for the episode as well. So you could click there and get those. Thank you so much, Christina, for being with us today. We truly appreciate you.
Yeah, it was an absolute delight to meet you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it.